The 1960s were arguably the most exciting decade in British automotive history. Everyone remembers the E-Type, the Mini, the Aston Martin DB5. But what about the cars that never made it into the posters, never graced the magazine covers, yet were built with just as much passion, precision, and British pride? These were the cars driven by doctors, engineers, and quiet connoisseurs, people who knew quality when they saw it, even if the world didn't notice. If you enjoy uncovering forgotten classics that deserve far more attention, consider subscribing, because this list might just change the way you see 1960s Britain entirely. And trust us, number 1 is genuinely stunning. Number 10, Singer Vogue. Most people walk straight past the Singer Vogue at a classic car show, and that is precisely the tragedy of this car. Launched in 1961, the Singer Vogue was a refined, beautifully trimmed saloon built on the Roots Group platform, but Singer always added something extra. The interior was genuinely luxurious for its price point, featuring wood veneer finishes and a level of cabin craftsmanship that rivaled cars costing significantly more. It was aimed at the aspirational British buyer, someone who wanted elegance without the Jaguar price tag. But here's what most people don't realize: the Singer Vogue was technically competent, comfortable on long journeys, and built to a remarkably high standard. It simply had the misfortune of existing in a decade when sportier, flashier names dominated conversations. Forgotten? Absolutely. Deserving of better? Without question. And the next car on this list had an equally quiet, equally compelling story. Number 9, Humber Scepter. If the Singer Vogue was the quiet professional, the Humber Scepter was his slightly more ambitious colleague. Launched in 1963, the Sceptre was Roots Group's attempt to create a sporting yet refined saloon, one that could blend performance with prestige in a way that felt genuinely British. It featured twin carburetors, a floor-mounted gearshift, and a dashboard that looked almost ahead of its time. Have you even heard of this one before? Most haven't, and that is exactly the point. The Humber Scepter was never loud about what it offered. It didn't need to be. Buyers who discovered it tended to become quietly devoted to it. The problem was marketing. Roots simply couldn't communicate what made the Scepter special, and in a decade full of noise, subtlety lost. But wait until you see what comes next, because the following entry suffered from a very different kind of problem entirely. Number 8, Austin 3-litre. Here is a car that arrived at exactly the wrong moment in history. The Austin 3-litre was BMC's bold attempt to compete in the executive saloon market, a proper, large, comfortable British motorcar with genuine road presence. And in many respects, it succeeded. The ride quality was exceptional, the cabin was spacious and well-appointed, and the 3-litre C-Series engine delivered smooth, unhurried performance perfectly suited to long-distance cruising. And this is where things get interesting. The Austin 3-litre was, by most objective measures, a good car. But it arrived just as British Leyland's reputation began to crumble, and it was dragged down not by its own failures, but by the chaos surrounding it. Buyers lost confidence in the brand before they ever gave the car a proper chance. Is this exactly why it was forgotten? Perhaps. But the next entry proves that even quality couldn't guarantee survival in 1960s Britain. Number 7, Wolseley 1885. The Wolseley name carried enormous weight in Britain. For decades it represented quality, refinement, and a certain dignified Englishness that other manufacturers struggled to replicate. The 1885, launched in 1967, was Wolseley's final serious attempt to keep that tradition alive in the modern era. Based on the same platform as the Austin 3-litre, it offered something genuinely different, a more characterful interior, the iconic Wolseley illuminated grille badge, and a driving experience that felt considered rather than rushed. You might not expect this, but many period road testers praised the 1885 quite warmly. It was comfortable, capable, and carried that unmistakable sense of occasion that Wolseley had always promised. Yet it sold in disappointing numbers and faded quietly from public memory. A car that deserved a longer story, but never got one. Stay with us, because the top 6 entries are where things become truly remarkable. Number 6, Rover P6. Now here is where the list begins to shift. The Rover P6 is perhaps the most genuinely underrated car in British automotive history, and that is saying something, given the company it keeps on this list. Launched in 1963 and named Car of the Year in 1964, the P6 was an engineering revelation. It featured a base unit body structure, inboard front disc brakes, and a level of technical sophistication that embarrassed many European competitors. And yet, outside of enthusiast circles, the Rover P6 is rarely mentioned in the same breath as the truly celebrated 1960s British icons. But here's what most people don't realize: the P6 was genuinely fast, genuinely modern, and genuinely beautiful in a restrained, purposeful way that still holds up today. It was the thinking person's performance car. Would you have picked this over a Jaguar? A growing number of collectors now say yes, and the car coming next once made a very similar case for itself. Number 5. Daimler V8250. The Daimler V8250 is one of those cars that rewards those patient enough to look beyond the badge. Built on the Jaguar Mk2 platform and fitted with Edward Turner's magnificent 2.5-litre V8 engine, the Daimler V8250 offered something the Jaguar version simply couldn't match: a smoother, more cultured power delivery that felt almost effortless at motorway speeds. The interior was trimmed to a higher standard, the fluted grille gave it its own distinct identity, and the overall driving experience was one of quiet, assured confidence. And this is where things get interesting: many drivers who owned both versions quietly preferred the Daimler. Not louder, not faster necessarily, but more refined, more considered. It was the car for those who understood the difference between performance and sophistication. Forgotten by the masses, treasured by those who knew. And what follows next is a car that was truly ahead of its era. Number 4. Sunbeam Rapier Fastback. Few cars from the 1960s look as modern as the Sunbeam Rapier Fastback, and that, rather ironically, may be part of why it struggled. Launched in 1965, the Rapier Fastback was a sleek, rakish coupe with a roofline so clean and a silhouette so well proportioned that it looked like it belonged to the following decade. It was stylish, affordable, and genuinely enjoyable to drive. But here's the surprising part: the Rapier Fastback was never given the promotional support it deserved. Roots Group was already under financial pressure, and the marketing budget simply wasn't there. A car this handsome, competing in a market full of far blander alternatives, should have been a runaway success. Instead, it became one of the great what-ifs of British motoring. Have you ever seen one in person? If you have, you already understand why it belongs on this list. Now, number 3 might genuinely surprise you. Number 3. Jensen Interceptor. The Jensen Interceptor is not a forgotten name, but its earliest phase absolutely is, and that distinction matters enormously. When the Interceptor debuted in 1966, it represented something genuinely ambitious for a small British manufacturer. The body was styled by Carrozzeria Touring of Italy, the construction was handled by Vignale, and the result was a grand tour of breathtaking visual drama, all wraparound rear glass, muscular haunches, and a cabin that felt genuinely opulent. But here's what most people don't realize: the very early Interceptors, before the car became synonymous with Chrysler V8 excess, had a character that was rawer, more earnest, more British in spirit than the later versions. These were cars built with genuine conviction by a small team who believed they were creating something extraordinary. And they were right. The Jensen Interceptor in its earliest form deserves to be spoken about far more often. Which brings us to number 2, and this one will genuinely move you. Number 2. Triumph 2000. The Triumph 2000 is, without question, one of the finest British saloons ever built, and the fact that it remains relatively obscure outside enthusiast communities is one of motoring history's quiet injustices. Launched in 1963 with styling by Giovanni Michelotti, the 2000 was immediately striking. It looked sophisticated, modern, and purposeful without being aggressive. Inside, the cabin was beautifully laid out, with a dashboard that combined clarity with elegance in a way that still feels thoughtful today. The ride quality was superb, the 6-cylinder engine refined, and the overall driving experience one of genuine pleasure. And this is where things get interesting: the Triumph 2000 was praised extensively by contemporary journalists, yet it never quite captured the public imagination the way lesser cars did. It was too sensible to be a cult car, too good to be ignored, and yet somehow, here we are. Stay with us, because number 1 is in a category entirely of its own. Number 1, Alvis TE21. And here we are. Number 1, the Alvis TE21, and if you haven't heard this name before, that is precisely the point of everything we have discussed today. Built between 1963 and 1966 in Coventry, the TE21 was one of the last truly coach-built British motorcars, each body hand-finished by Park Ward of London, each interior trimmed to the specific requirements of its buyer. The result was something almost impossibly rare, a car that felt handcrafted in an era of increasing industrialization. The lines were elegant without being showy, the engineering was meticulous without being ostentatious, and the driving experience was one of calm, extraordinary refinement that no other British car of the period could match at its price point. The Alvis TE21 was not a car for everyone. It was a car for those who truly understood what they were looking at. And that, perhaps, is exactly why it was forgotten, and exactly why it is stunning. The 1960s gave us legends, but it also gave us these. Cars built with care, ambition, and a very British sense of quiet excellence that the world simply wasn't ready to celebrate. From the elegant Singer Vogue to the breathtaking Alvis TE21, each of these machines tells a story about craftsmanship, timing, and the cruel randomness of automotive history. Not every great car becomes an icon, but every great car deserves to be remembered. Which entry surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, we read every single one. If you enjoyed this, please like the video and subscribe to Britain Rewind. There are many more forgotten stories still waiting to be told.